Marlee, I want to start with you because, first of all, congratulations on making your directorial debut. I want to know how it felt for you to be able to make your debut with a series like this, particularly with the story of Ava, and being able to do so alongside, showrunner Howard Gordon.
Well, Howard Gordon, naturally, when I first found out or heard his name from my agent, who called me and said, would you like to direct? And I said, direct, what is it specifically? And he said, Accused. And I said, Accused, what is it specifically? It's a brand new show. Nothing for me to, I couldn't, there was no history there. I didn't know anything about the show. It was a brand new show. So that was fine. And I said, for who? And he said, Howard Gordon. And I said, oh, okay, duh. Okay, fine. So I'm a huge fan of Howard's, and for him to ask me was a huge honor, particularly because I'd never directed before. And it didn't matter because he had the wherewithal, he had the belief in me, knew that I, with Ava's story in particular, would be the perfect vehicle for me to be able to make my debut as a director. And I had an amazing time. I had a blast. And every day being on set was nothing but a treat for me. I had no idea what to expect, and yet working behind the camera was, it was like being on set with everyone, one big party where we could just work together and learn together and listen and love. And I loved working with actors always. But being an actor made it even more special for me. It was just an incredible experience, and I learned a great deal as a director. And I look forward to doing more.
Yes, we want to see more as well. I want to ask, there's so many layers to Ava's story, I think both in terms of representation for the deaf community and also advocacy. For you, what was most important to get right in telling that story?
The most important thing for me was, as a director in the episode, was to be able to make sure that it was as authentic as possible. Obviously, casting deaf actors was the most important thing. Working with hearing actors, of course, making sure that it was an easy fit. It didn't matter how I worked with them because I work with everyone, regardless of whether they're deaf or hearing. I, as an actor, work with hearing actors on a daily basis, so it's the same thing as a director. And the story itself was very sensitive, and it's actually based on true events, and it happens in real life. So to be able to understand where Ava was coming from, as a woman, as a deaf woman, as a woman, not as a mother really, but as a surrogate. And there were so many layers, as you said, that I could identify with, and to be able to feel protective of the deaf community, of the deaf baby, of everyone in this story. There's so many cultural references in there, and I understood them all 100%. And the fact that the hearing actors who played the parents, really, really made it was actually reminded me of my own parents who were hearing, who had to learn what it was like when I was diagnosed as deaf at 18 months old, and the story sort of was in the same journey, was very heavy for me. Watching the hearing characters act as parents to their deaf child, to try to understand what they were going through and what was best for their child, where Ava disagreed with them. So watching that, as I was directing that in the monitor, and the close-up on the hearing actors, I started to lose it and cry because it reminded me of my parents and what they had to go through when they on their unexpected journey, never having met or even seen a deaf child before. So there were lots of layers here in that episode, and I really, really, I got to go through it. I worked through it every day, and I'm very proud of it.
Yeah. I feel like that sort of answers my next question. I was going to ask if there were any surprises, you encountered being a deaf director, but even the emotion, I'm sure you didn't expect that.
Well, there were plenty of surprises for me because working behind the camera for me, I was shocked at how each and every member of the crew, the art department, the costumes, even craft services, whatever you want to say that goes into making a show, worked so hard. Like they were like creating a painting for me, and I was there to create the frame. And working with each and every one of them, watching them paint, putting it together, putting it in a vision. We all worked together collaboratively, and what surprised me was really, and this is, I'm being honest, as an actor, I know, you know how you're on a set as an actor and you're waiting, you know, in your trailer. As a director, time goes by really fast. So different than when you're an actor. I loved how it went by so quickly. But the bottom line is that the work that each and every person put into it and put their heart into it to create one great episode was really amazing to me. And I'll never see a set the same way again.
That's beautiful. Whitney and Keith, I want to come to you. You know, I'm coming back, but
this is going well. Let's just keep this train going.
You know, what drew me in from the very first episode is, you know, the setup. You think that the case is going to be about one thing, and then this subplot comes in. You're like, what? You know, out of nowhere, and the whole focus is there, which is exciting. You know, as a viewer, I'm curious for you all, you know, when you saw the script or the opportunity, you know, what drew you to your particular roles?
Sir? Oh. Thank you. You know, it is a dubious honor when the great Howard Gordon calls and says, we have a role that's a girl, she's a mess. She makes terrible decisions with men, and she's a not funny comedian, straight off her. No, you know, reading the script, you know, obviously it's Howard Gordon. You're already like, yes, you know, and then you're like, maybe I should read the script at some point. And reading it, you know, my reactions to it were that it broke my heart, and it really pissed me off. And I think those are two things that for, you know, a litany of reasons right now, we've been made afraid to do a little bit. You know, I think, you know, with the confluence of us, you know, I'll speak for myself, and, you know, what I've seen around me is, you know, there's so much horrific stuff out there, and we're, you know, I feel we're all going a little bit numb. You know, and when you hear about a different school shooting every morning when you wake up, and then to watch the first episode of Accused and all of a sudden be enraged again. Yeah. Because, you know, I think this is what artists do when we're at our best. What TV does and movies do when we're at our best is we make people angry again, and we confront people and wake them up. And even if that means breaking their heart or pissing them off, you know, I'm primarily in comedy, where right now it's terrifying to me that people are afraid of talking about subjects like this, you know, and how are we going to solve any of these problems or even begin to scratch the surface of getting a new level of awareness, or all the things that as artists we all wake up every morning hoping that our tiny contribution can sort of move the needle down the field in terms of progress or consciousness or, you know, whatever it is. But, you know, reading it, I was like, you know, I'm in a business where, you know, a field where you would never be able to say, you know, and I'm even scared to say it now. You know, in the episode that's about sexual assault, they say the word rape. Yeah. And that's a word, I think, that, you know, you look at the news media, and the news media really, you know, desensitizes us in a lot of ways by sensationalizing things, but then also they'll use vagueness to try to not make things too uncomfortable because they don't want you to look away. So when I saw an episode that was about sexual assault, which is a very vague kind of umbrella term that, you know, because I think we tend to not want to be uncomfortable. We'll go, oh, it was probably just a long hug at the office party, you know? Exactly. When it was actually this very brutal rape. Yeah. And saying the word in there, I was like, you know, if anyone can do this, it's going to be Howard Gordon. He's, you know, obviously earned the right to do it. It's being handled so delicately. The writer, Sanne Hoffman, she was on American Crime. I mean, I'm a giant fan of hers. And the way that they told the story, like you said, you know, the way that the story is told really confronts the viewer with their own biases, their own prejudices, your own internalized misogyny, and holds a mirror up to you. Yeah. And I think right now we're in a place where you see so many people online and everywhere so addicted to their self-righteous indignation, and that we're all just kind of like pointing fingers at everybody, and we forget to go, oh, how could I possibly be right about everything? Like, what are the chances I'm right about everything? Probably zero. You know, and so I found myself judging this girl, this character, Brande. You know, she has a, you know, drinking problem, to say the least. She's what many people would consider a, you know, promiscuous, slutty type of person. She's, you know, very desperate. She's reckless. She's feral. She comes from foster care. You know, she has a lot of trauma. She's loud. She's cringy. She's annoying. And the question is, even if someone's all those things, do they still deserve to be treated like this? Do they still deserve? And in your mind, you know, do you go, well, I mean, she had slept with him before, so why wouldn't this be, you know, any different? Well, she's desperate. She wanted something for him career-wise. What did she think was going to happen? And I found myself, even while reading it, being like, come on, why couldn't you just leave? Like, why just leave the room? Like, you know, and I was like, oh my God, I just did that. And I was like, I want to do this so badly because I want to shed my own internalized misogynies or whatever biases I come from or have. And that's what this show wants to do to other people too. And I already know after reading the script, I'm changed.
Yeah.
So maybe I have a
Yeah.
shot of if I can give my all to this and maybe having that impact on someone else, which would be the greatest honor.
Yes, absolutely.
Same.
Thought you might say that.
Obviously, when you hear Howard Gordon is at the helm of this production, you sit up and take notice. And I was sent the script, and it was just a script that we actors, we read stuff like this, and it's like, I have to do this. And it was quick timing because there was another project that I was about to go into, and we were trying to work out the dates if I was going to have time to do this before that. I had already buzz cut my hair for that project, so my next question was, is it okay how I look right now? Because I'm playing an aging rock star. I just buzz cut my hair, and I'm growing this Van Dyke for this other role. And then I saw a picture of Billy Joel, and I thought, it's fine. And then the material itself was so immediate, as is every episode of this series. This is about stuff that we are all experiencing right now as a society. And this particular story, which deals with drug addiction and the parents of an adult drug-abusing, self-destructive son. And I'm a parent. I have adult children. I also have now a little boy. He's 4.5. So I know a little bit about this, what it feels like as a parent to feel responsible for, your kids, and at the same time trying to juggle your responsibility for their well-being with what you are pursuing yourself as a career. And particularly in the arts. And I've done this. I've been an actor, and I've been a musician. That was another thing that enticed me to the role, was the fact that as a songwriter and a singer, I was given the opportunity in this role to do some of that again on screen, and I hadn't done that in quite a while. So there were a lot of things about it that were quite inviting for me. Then, of course, the story itself and the nature of what happens in the story. It's a heartbreaking story. And I can honestly say that I worked with an extraordinary group of people. It was truly a pleasure every second of every day to be doing the work we were doing, and at the same time, it was hell because of the subject matter. It was really dark, deep, depressing stuff to do, and at the end of every day, I would be on the phone home to my wife saying, how you doing, honey? I said, I think we're doing something good, and I'll be really glad to finish it. And I'm happy to say that in retrospect, having seen the episode, I'm proud of what we all did, and I think that we told the story that we were trying to tell, and I think under the aegis of the network and Howard Gordon in particular, it was a privilege to be a part of something like this. Yeah.
Absolutely. Whitney, I want to go back to what you said. I feel like I just got confronted, as you just said, about rage, like in judgment, because I realized I think I felt that, the episode doesn't end in this neat little bow, and you see Brenda apologize.
Yeah.
Honestly, which I think women do so much, in so many ways. And I'm curious for you, you are a comedian and you're in this male-dominated, world. How much of that story rings true to things that, you've seen,
Sure.
Around you?
Sure, and something to that, because I was thinking about this on the way here too, is, the episode that I did, she's assaulted brutally, goes to the DA to try to get some kind of justice. She's, this is someone that, very specifically was preyed on because of how powerless she is, and this isn't just a drunken mixed signals kind of thing. This isn't a vague kind of thing. We can get to the sort of granular logistics of how the intimacy coordinator was worked with us for days to find something in the sexual assault scene that made it very clear that this wasn't an accident, it wasn't a miscommunication, because she was laughing it off, and we all tend to just hope that the person might make the right decision if you just are obsequious enough, or something that would make it basically irrefutably dehumanizing, and something that this person does in a serial way, right? So she was given no choice, but she couldn't fight back. This is someone that was very wily person, a very strong person, has been through a lot, and I'm not a I'm not a whisperer of a lass either. I think people think of me as sort of dominant and as what I do for a living as a stand-up. And so I really wanted to make sure it was very clear that this is what he did was so disarming that she couldn't even defend herself because she was in such shock. And what I sort of love about this, the tiny bit of triumph in it, even though it was not wrapped up in a bow and there wasn't a happy ending in any capacity, which I feel was so brave on Howard's part. He wasn't trying to make the audience feel comfortable at the end. He wanted you to stay hurt. He wanted you to stay having to, feel it. And the goal was that this would haunt you, especially people that haven't been through it.
Yes.
Women that have been through that, you don't have to convince women that have been through this how awful it is. But, the men that haven't, it's not your fault. But the goal, I was hoping that this would affect the people that maybe, didn't know how, life-changing it could be, and soul-shadowing, that, even that 2-3 minutes, whatever it was, could be to change the way you see yourself forever. How dehumanizing. But because this predator, which many do, they pick their prey very specifically, right? People that have drug problems, people that are disconnected from their family, people that couldn't financially retaliate because they don't have any money, people with low self-esteem, etc. But what was slightly triumphant about it is that what a lot of predators don't understand is oftentimes those are the women that have the least amount to lose. So what was kind of amazing about her is that because she had so little to lose, and because she was already so embarrassed, everybody already thought she was a whore, already thought she was a mess, she didn't have anything to lose. Yeah. So there was something so amazing about, how hard she went at, trying to basically get justice, not for herself. That was, I think, the key to the character for me is this is not somebody that had self-respect. This is someone that has been through a lot of this. It's just this is the one thing she couldn't drink away because of the exact thing that happened. And thank you, Fox and Sony, for letting us do this, because I know it was a little bit of a back and forth of is FCC gonna let us do this? We figured out with the Intimacy Corner one thing. It even makes me cringe a little bit to say now, thank God the director, she, was so supportive and figuring out what this little moment was, and the actor who, played the part, brave as he is, a little a thing that he did that was just it was almost like a fish hook, I believe don't Google it. It'll ruin your algorithm forever. Something that would sort of used her face as a way to, because the more nudity you show, we didn't want to get into that. Yeah. We wanted to show this sociopathic move that looked very rehearsed and done. So she's haunted by the fact that, the ship has sailed for her having self-esteem or any kind of life, but he does this to other people too. Yeah. And the cycle, this is going to stop with me. Yeah. And so I had to find a little bit of a light there to be able to have the same fight in me as the actor playing her, as Brande had. Being a comedian, it being so sort of in my world definitely made it a little bit complicated, but because the idea was that it's not only comedians and celebrities that deal with this. In fact, maybe we're the ones that actually have the most ability to get out of the situation or remove ourselves or walk off the job. Waitresses, women that work, I've did a lot of research on women that work on farms and in assembly lines. They can't just leave. They're not getting paid a lot, and it's their bosses, and they don't have a lot of options. It's immigrants, so we really want to make sure that it was going to be relatable to every field, but something that everyone on the show really understood, which is the same as in comedy, is the more specific you are, the more universal you are. Yeah. So I was like, okay, the more specific we are about this, the more universal it's going to be. So, I'm in a business where there's lots of that kind of behavior, and because the men in my field and women, which is the kind of women that Brande was, you can kind of stay immature and not having consequences for a very long time, and you have to take care of your mental health and heal yourself, and not a lot of people do. So there was definitely, because what I've seen in my field, I unfortunately was in a situation where I did have to speak up about a predator in our field that I had worked with, and it was devastating. It wrecked me. I ended up dyeing my hair blue. That's how traumatic it was. So I wasn't even a quarter as courageous as Brande was. It definitely made me feel enough anger to be able to get an in on what she was going through, even though I've gone through what she's gone through in different iterations, but to have to do it publicly and to go I'm going to lose everything I've worked for. Yeah. But it's not even, she didn't even have to spend any time thinking about that. It was so obvious to her. So all the things that drove me nuts about her, how immature she was, you know, how much of a mess she was, how irresponsible she was, I just fell in love with her because as soon as that happened, it was a no-brainer. She never looked back. She never thought twice. Yeah. Is that I know this is going to ruin my already, you know, horrible life, but this has to stop here.
Yeah. And thank you for doing that as well.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
It's how could you not?
Yeah. And really, that is the antithesis also of Rhea Perlmans, you know, character. Yeah, which it was so hard seeing her, the position her character took, but then so great it's Rhea Perlman. You know, you're excited to see her.
And Rhea Perlman's character, you know, it's that it was so beautifully written. It's also Rhea Perlman, you know, but the different generations of women and men and the different ways they see these things. You know, Rhea Perlman's character, who was the manager of the comedy club, was like, "You're so close. Just let this one slide."
Yeah.
You know, if I said something every time something like this happened to me, that's all I do, you know, and sort of that the only sort of mother figure she ever had saying that to her, you know, that was incredibly complex. And I love that this show just had so many different points of view and so much different kinds of pressure. Yeah. You know, it didn't feel like it was didactic or had an agenda. It was like, we're going to present all these flawed characters and all the information, and we're going to make it like a Rorschach test. So ultimately, you have to look at yourself and what you're deducing and who you're rooting for or who you think it was. Like, that's on you, and you have to take a look at yourself.
Yeah.
So she really did. She really, God, she's so incredible. And she's this tall.
Yes.
And, you know,
Yes.
and I was like, okay, I'm sort of intimidated by her. Yeah. And I'm doing all this acting work. And then I got on set and I was like, oh, she's making it sort of so easy.
Yes. Amazing. Thank you. Keith, I'm coming to you next. First, I have to say, I actually was a fan of that song in your episode.
It's a jam.
Yes, there's a
jam.
song his son wants to put on his album, wouldn't let him. And I wanted it on the album. But, you know, there were some really beautiful studio moments, you know, when that scene first starts. I know you have a bit of a musical background. Is that you performing in the episode? Okay, can you talk about that at all?
Yeah, I mean, when Howard came to me and we were talking about the music, he knew that I was a songwriter, and you know, he said, you know, I mean, you could probably just write some stuff for this. And I said I could, but that's become very complicated now because of the nature of the corporate structure and how music is handled. Who owns it? Who, as the writer, I had just done a film, a Christmas movie with Tanya Tucker a few months back, and I was working with Tanya, and there was a moment in that film that called for me to be performing a song. And they said, you do something public domain? I said, yeah, or I could just write something. They said, would you? And I said, yeah, I'd love to get into this. So they gave me a very specific set of parameters. I wrote a song. Everybody loved it. Tanya loved it. I did it in the movie. And then the production entity came back to me and said, okay, thanks for that. Now, here's the deal. We're going to give you this amount of money, and it's ours. We own it. And I said, no, that's not what I do. But I mean, you know, and we did a version of the take where I did something public domain, but they finally came around. They said, oh no, he has a history of having done this in films before.
Yeah.
He has 2 records that he's put out, and he has his own publishing house, and that's me. And I said, so, you know, I'm not looking for the money. Yeah. I mean, you know, I don't need a lot of money for you to use my song, but it's mine. Mm-hmm. So, you know, you can have it and you can use it in the thing and you can pay me a licensing fee and you can use the song, and that's what they did. And it was a modest fee, and it was, like I said, it wasn't about the money, but it was about the principle of owning the song. Well, I had that conversation with Howard, and he said, yeah, I know the deal. I've been there. And he said, in fact, my son Micah is a songwriter, and I said, great. You guys come up with something. You can do your deal with Sony and with Fox, and I don't have to get involved, and we don't have to get into that dance of the sand crabs, you know, about who gets what for what, you know. Yeah. And you just write it, and I'll perform it. And so I went down and I met Micah, Howard's son, at his place in his studio, and he played me what they had. And it was really good. Mm-hmm. And Micah had managed to write sort of to my sensibility. And it felt like something I would have done anyway. Okay. So it was really easy to perform it. And I played the guitar, and we recorded it, and we did a couple of songs. And then we did an extended version of one of them. So, yeah, that's a very long answer to your question, which is, yes, in fact, that is me performing it. Yes.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, I tried to let Howard let me sing.
season
Didn't work
two.
out. Didn't work out. No, but there is music in my particular episode. And it's interesting that you talk about music, where the father in this episode was a musician, and he wrote music. And clearly, that's not my wheelhouse, but it didn't matter. So I asked the question: what kind of music is it? What is it that it sounds like? What is it that you envision, Howard? What is it you want people to feel while he's playing music, while he's working? What is the message that you want to come through the music? And he explained it to me, and I said, okay, fine. And then I was more worried about the camera shots, obviously, and landing on that moment. But that was, it's what's beautiful about my job as a director is working collaboratively, working in a way that we together can make this decision. It's just not my decision. If somebody said to me, Marlee, they're going to ask you 400 questions a day. Are you ready for that? And I said, well, yeah, of course I am. All I can say is yes, no, maybe, I don't know, great, or whatever. And it worked.
And there's also that sense of loss, too, with music. The father thought that he would be able to have that connection in a certain way, and had to kind of grieve that, which was interesting in that episode as well.
I just wanted to say, this is, I think, what great showrunners, do, is that every department was on the same page about what this show was doing. Even the makeup department, I remember, I'm sure it's every makeup department's nightmare to say, like, hey, can the makeup look kind of bad? She's not good at putting her own makeup on, she's always kind of crying in a bathroom, she's always smudging her makeup, she's kind of a mess, she leaves her eyeliner on a little too long, she doesn't want, so to ask a makeup and hair person, like, can she kind of look ugly in a way, or look like a mess, or can her makeup not be applied properly, or in between takes of like the very emotional ones, can we not do touch-ups, kind of thing, more for the performance of the distraction of when a makeup person comes on to be like, now I feel like I have to make you laugh, and I'm worried I'm going to go into Whitney Cummings instead of all these mannerisms and flow state of this other character, because I was so afraid of Whitney Cummings popping out, rearing her ugly head, that would have been a nightmare, because I'm playing a different female comedian, and I just didn't want to bring that in or have anyone be reminded of me. So everyone was so on the same page about it, and that, I've never really witnessed any kind of, dynamic like that before, where everyone from art department to wardrobe to everything was so on the same page.
Love that.
Amazing, Marlee.
Well, to that point, to wrap up with the last question, I want to ask, the Hollywood Reporter recently had its second annual Raising Our Voices luncheon. And, every speaker, whether it was a woman or a person of color or a person with disabilities, the underlying message was, we just want, people who look like me to be the ones who get to tell the stories about people that are like me. And I feel like Ava's story is obviously such a beautiful example of that, but the other examples as well. How do we make sure that is the norm going forward?
Well, we have to keep speaking about it. We have to have our allies, like the people here in the room, and like our Howard, and to raise our voices, just like we want to raise our voices. I've been deaf all my life. I've seen all the barriers. I've seen all the rejection. I've seen the oppression. I've seen autism, as they call it, all the isms that come my way. I've learned to just knock each one down and say, fuck them all.
Yes, you have.
Sorry, my team is here going, oh no, what did she say? And yet, I spoke last year at the first Hollywood Reporter event, and the room felt very, very, it was very powerful to be there because people were listening. And in all honesty, I'm tired of talking about it, and yet I can't stop talking about it. Yeah. If I get through to 2 or 3 people in the industry who will allow me to work as an actor, as a director, then I'm good. Then I'm good.
Sorry, this is this messy answer of, access, and so during the pandemic, there was an app called Clubhouse that came out. I don't know if you remember Clubhouse. Yes. It was sort of, when everyone was just staring at a wall, wondering if we were going to die from a bat sandwich or whatever was happening. There was this thing called Clubhouse where anyone could log in, and it was like live podcasts with just anyone. And I kind of started these rooms with just friends and stuff, and because I was just so baffled why in our business it was so hard to find writers of color, it was so hard to find, there were makeup artists and hair artists that, you know, you would hire and then they couldn't do black hair. And you're like, then why not? Oh, let's get a woman of color to do the hair. And they're like, oh, we can't get one. And you're like, there's no way that's true. Right. And, you know, I had some conversations with the unions, which the unions have a lot of things they're dealing with right now, I know, but making sure that, you know, because in order to get in certain unions, you have to have a certain number of episodes, and that's based on 24 episodes, and we're not doing 24 episodes for the most part anymore. So I think some parts of the unions, you know, are a little bit creating obstacles to the very people they're supposed to protect, and I think there's, you know, we're long overdue for a couple upgrades in those areas so that people don't have to have this wild amount of union hours in order to get, and then also agency representation too. It's like they have to really step up too, and actively recruiting talent, actively just not, I'm sorry, it's, what are they doing? I mean, what is, you know, so I think it's also not just like, hey, my rich friend's daughter wants to be an actress, you know, which is fine. I'm just, they had a good run, you know, but I think it's actively, you know, these diversity showcases, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of mixed opinions on them, and we have to say, you know, I'm sure that might not even be the word anyone wants to use in 2 weeks, and I'm going to get canceled for saying this, but like, we just have to, you know, and then there's these tricky situations where, you know, there's these rules where you're not allowed to ask what someone is, but then how do you, you know, so I think it's just the obnoxious white woman sometimes standing up and asking uncomfortable questions and being like, let's just say, hey, like, how do we recruit these people too? Because even if they're not ready, let's give them a mentorship program or shadowing directors, and we have to try harder. Yes. That's very simple.
Yes.
We have to walk and talk the talk.
Yeah, and because also it makes the work better. The audiences deserve it, exactly. You know, and in a business where everyone's so concerned about why things aren't making as much money is because this isn't what people want to watch anymore. They want to see different experiences. They want to see different stories, and not everyone looks like that. Yeah.
And I just wanted to add on that, in terms of how the whole dynamic works, we're trying to tell stories that people want to see. And the explosion of technology that has enabled everybody to put themselves out there on some level is making it harder and harder to lie to people in terms of telling a story and having it be truthful about the emotions that are being expressed and the kinds of people that are experiencing that story, because most people now have access to people whose stories are real, and they're seeing examples of that. So I think that it's going to force us all as an industry to stop trying to fake it. And the best way to not fake it is to hire the real people, the most real actors, performers that you can find who are going to play those roles, who have the closest connection to the issues that those characters are experiencing. And I think that the audience is going to force us into that. And that's kind of it's how it ought to be, I think.
Absolutely. And there's so many creators online right now too. You know, you see creators are like, I'm not going through this rigmarole where I'm, you know, like, you know, like what I did, which is like go to lunch with a bunch of Gersh agents. There were dates, and try to this Byzantine way of trying to just do what you love. These people are just taking this next generation is taking matters into their own hands, and they're editing their own content. They're using their phones. They're making great work. You know, and why can't that transition into directing an episode of television? Why not? I mean, it's kind of the same thing. Have someone just, you know, you have 9 executive producers that don't really, you know, they one of them can tell them what to do.
And I really want to thank you as Emmy voters tonight for coming out to listen to us tell these kind of stories. It means a great deal. And thank Fox and Sony for having us on their show and being our advocates. They've been so amazing, and I really do appreciate it.
Amazing.
And we appreciate you all for being here as well. Thank you. Thank you for the great work on Accused. Thank you, Fox, Sony Pictures. Thank you all for being here.
Wow.